This is OPI Structure Part 3, Architecture Implementation. You've seen this figure of the PowerOpI course structure in the workshop overview. The slides up to now have been about constructing the tables at lower left. In PowerOpI projects, they contain data describing product structure and the development program to build it. There's a later module on this site describing table structure for computer system development. Your project may have a different structure. My descriptions show how to use the tools and a sequence for doing that, and you can map my method to your situation. Next, we're going into linking tables into a database system. In the database system, they can be joined, for example, to explode an allocation table using a BOM table to produce a listing of elements to build or buy. In my example, we're going to do many more join operations to pull in dates and other product and program information. And we can use Microsoft Access with SQL, Microsoft Power BI with Power Query and DAX, or SQL Server to do that. The structure we're going to describe next links Excel tables into the database tool, where you can query them and join them to produce a query result. That query result can be used from Excel or Power BI to drive pivot tables and other visualizations that select data from the query result, filter it, sort it, aggregate it, and present it in reports that can be used by organizations to map out their work. And before we get into how to build queries, here's the query structure that the examples follow. You build a structure like this in Access or in Power Query or in SQL Server. You can also build a query in Excel for the database tool to execute, and we'll cover that later. The center column represents tables you build in Excel, as we've seen in the earlier slides. There will be modules later on in this channel describing more specifics of those tables, how to organize data, how to use dates, how to build a BOM structure. Then the rightmost blocks here show joins, connecting tables and queries to aggregate a query result containing a data structure you can use back in Excel or Power BI to drive pivot tables and visualizations. Coming up, we'll cover several ways to build queries. How to build joins stored in Access, each query linking Excel tables or else a preceding query and joining that into a query result. And how to build a SQL query for Access, joining all tables in a single SQL query. And how to use the Power Query Editor to build and stack single join queries. There's a separate module on this channel for SQL Server that covers a SQL query joining all tables. Using Access, you refresh the Excel pivot using the final query result, and that causes the stack of queries to execute, including reading tables linked in from Excel. We'll review some refresh behavior differences between Access and Power Query that are important when using the tools created. PowerOpI is implemented by linking tables from one tool into another. This figure shows the architecture for that. Looks scary, but there are 5 principal paths through it that we'll explore. 2 paths 1 and 3 are for SQL databases. 2 paths 2 and 4 are for Power BI. And path 5 is for a SQL database in front of Power BI. In path 1, Excel structured tables are routed through MS Access, where they're queried, then go back into Excel through an Excel data connection to drive pivot reports or visualizations. Path 2 has functionality similar to Path 1 using Power Query. Excel structured tables are routed through Power Query in Excel, where they're queried, and from there drive Power Pivot or Power BI visualizations. DAX may be applied. A similar path can route the Excel structured tables into Power BI Desktop. Path 3 takes data from an external data source, such as the file exported from Microsoft Project containing task dates, and pulls it through an Excel data connection and drops it into a structured table in Excel, which may then do further Excel calculation and then follow the other paths shown from structured tables in Excel. Path 4 has functionality similar to Path 3, pulling data from an external source through Power Query into an Excel structured table for subsequent use via the other paths from a table in Excel. Path 5 is a hybrid with the SQL database ahead of Power BI. It may be useful to perform a query join in SQL, as is the case for a BOM explosion, and then take that query result through Power Query into Power BI for DAX, Power Pivot, and visualizations in Power BI Excel or into Power BI Desktop. So now we're going to see step by step how these connections are created. OPI structure sequence videos following this one describe implementation of these OPI paths. OPI Structure 1, Structured Tables, covered basics of Excel structured tables. OPI Structure 2, Table Calculations, covered Excel in-table calculations using index match and SUMIF. OPI Structure 3, Architecture Implementation, this module, maps the OPI paths into structure sequence videos following this one. OPI Structure 4, Database Linked Tables, shows the first part of OPI Path 1, how to connect Excel tables into an Access database. This is also used to implement OPI Path 5, OPI Hybrid Path using Microsoft Access with Power Query. OPI Structure 5, Access Query, describes building of queries in Microsoft Access and connecting a query result to Excel using an Excel data connection to complete implementation of OPI Path 1. The Access query result is also used in OPI Path 5 using Power Query. Queries in SQL Server are described in a separate video sequence on SQL Server in PowerOpI. OPI Structure 6, Power Query, shows how to connect and query Excel structured tables and Microsoft Access query results using Power Query to build OPI Path 2 and OPI Path 5. OPI Path 7, Import, shows how to import external data into Excel using Excel data connections to implement Path 3 and using Power Query to implement OPI Path 4. This OPI structure sequence continues in OPI Structure Part 4, Database Linked Tables.